Hi, my name is Nadia Lau. I am currently a senior, a fourth year psychology major, education minor. And today I will be talking to you all about how I came to know Christ and what He's done in my life, what He still is doing in my life. So let's get started. I was born and raised into a Christian household. My dad is the senior pastor of my church, and my mom is the children's coordinator. So my sister and I had a lot of Christian influences growing up, listening to Bible stories, singing worship songs, watching VeggieTales, literally just roaming through the halls of the church. And so ever since I was young, I remember my parents would always tell me about God's love for me and how He sent His Son to die on the cross for my sins. And so I distinctly remember probably when I was in kindergarten, first grade, pretty young, my parents were by my bedside and asked, "Do you want to accept Jesus as your Lord and personal Savior?" And I thought in my mind, do I want to go to hell? No. Do I want to have this amazing relationship with my Creator and my Father in heaven? Yeah, sweet. Sounds great. And so I said yes, like without a shadow of a doubt. I don't think I necessarily knew the weight of my sins back then. And so I had more conversations with my parents growing up, just to really know who God is and just to make sure that my faith was my own. It wasn't me believing because my parents wanted me to believe. And so for me, I don't think there was necessarily like an aha moment where a lot of people have like, oh, this is when I knew that I believed. For me, it was more of a gradual process. And so I remember in 7th grade, I freaked out after reading a passage in Matthew. It was Matthew 7:21 to 23. "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day many will say to me, 'Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and do many mighty works in your name?' And then will I declare to them, 'I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness.'" Basically, in 7th grade, I had this fear of living my entire life thinking that I was Christian, and then when I died, by heaven's gates, Jesus will look at me and say, "Depart from me, I never knew you." That confused me, that scared me. I was scared that I thought I believed in my head, but I didn't truly accept it in my heart. And so I talked to my parents again, and they explained to me the idea of justification, sanctification, and soon after I went to this summer retreat, and I rededicated my life and myself to the Lord completely. I had a spiritual high, but I had already been serving in ministry, children's ministry and worship, but it wasn't until then that I realized that I truly wanted to serve for the glory of God. And even though eventually my spiritual high fizzled out, I think I continued to pursue the Lord in normalcy and in the mundane, just to, I guess, keep reading the Word. And I definitely really did take my faith seriously. And so in sophomore year of high school, I got baptized. And so a very common theme in my life is the idea of trusting in the Lord. I remember even when I was young, like 2nd grade, when I moved from a Christian school to my public school, elementary school, I made a few friends and I wanted to preach the gospel to them. And so I gained the courage and I walked up to my friend and I told her about Jesus and God and all that. And I think she kind of just shrugged me off and she was like, yeah, like I already know all that, but I'm Jewish. And so for me, I think that was the moment where I knew, or I really craved a Christian friend who shared the same morals as me, that we could grow together in our faith and like support one another, like even in school. And I continued to pray throughout elementary school, middle school, and it wasn't until my freshman year of high school that God blessed me with my current best friend, who we still keep each other accountable. But I didn't know why I had to wait like 7 years before I met a Christian friend to walk together. But ultimately, I trusted in God's goodness, and I knew that in His timing, He will provide, and He did. And then senior year of high school, during college applications, I felt like God kind of opened the door to UC Irvine. That was my dream school. That was the only UC that offered an education major, and I knew I wanted to be a teacher from a long time ago. It was in SoCal, nice weather, it was close to Disneyland. My best friend also wanted to go there. It seemed like the stars were aligning, and I thought I was going to get in. And when all my friends got either accepted or waitlisted, I straight up got rejected. And that was not only a huge blow to my pride, but I think that really confused me. I didn't know where God wanted to lead me. But ultimately, I trusted in His goodness and His faithfulness, and He led me here to Santa Cruz. And I'm thankful for that. I met all of you. But I think a big part of my testimony is the latter half of my senior year. I became senior year of high school, to clarify. I became pretty close friends with this guy, and he pursued me, but I said no because he was not a Christian, and I was not allowed to date in high school. But as our friendship continued, I eventually fell for him, and we kind of became a thing. And this kind of hidden relationship led to me lying to my family, lies on top of lies to my parents, sinning. I think that changed my relationship a lot with my parents because I had to cover up whatever I had going on in my life. And I thought I could convert him. Clearly I was wrong, but eventually my sins crept up on me, and I eventually confessed to my sister, and she obviously rebuked me and told me I needed to end it, which I did. And so I ended it, I prayed to God, and I confessed my sins, and I thought that was the end of it. But coming into college in October of my freshman year, I was pretty tired of church hopping, and I was deciding between TBC and another church. And so I remember that week I went to TBC, and I prayed for God to give me discernment and wisdom in choosing a church. And that week, Pastor Steve spoke on Daniel 4, and he used the example of his son apologizing to him for a sin that he had done. But he didn't he didn't confess to his father because he was scared that Pastor Steve was going to find out. It was because that was the right thing to do, to right your wrongs, to ask for forgiveness. And that deeply resonated with me. And so when I got back to my dorm that day, I called my parents and I apologized, confessed my sins, and my mom and I were crying on the phone for half an hour. She forgave me, and we cried through happiness and through sadness. It was kind of just amazing to see how God truly reconciled my relationships with both my parents. And a plus side, I found my church through that. And I think being in college for the past 4 years, I've greatly appreciated Kyrie and TBC. Not only have I gained more knowledge about my faith and who God is, but it's also very interesting having conversations about, I guess, more theological aspects, like learning about Calvinism my freshman year, having conversations about lordship salvation, predestination, all that. But I really do think that I made my faith my own throughout college. And I think especially throughout college, whenever I would reflect on how sinful I am, I'd always be in awe because I realize that God knows me better than I know myself. He knows my past, present, and future, and He knows how sinful I am. And yet He loves me so much. And I think with that, my favorite verse is from 1 John 4:19. We love because He first loved us. And with that in mind, I wanted to learn to love my brothers and sisters, and so what better way to kind of practice that than serve them? And so my second and third year of college, I served in Kyrie, and that's definitely helped me grow a lot. And now, here I am as a senior. It's crazy how far we've come, and I just think reflecting on how God has worked in my life it's been crazy, honestly. I've seen friendships come and go, relationships be built and torn down. As I mentioned earlier, a very common theme in my life is to trust in the Lord, and it's been evident now more than ever through this time of uncertainty that I need to trust in the Lord. The Lord gives and He takes away. I found out that our graduation commencement is in June is officially canceled. My school that I volunteer in is closed until next year, which means I will never be able to see my kids, my students that I've known for 2 years now, ever again, and I didn't get to say bye. With the whole shelter in place, I'm basically here at home, away from my college community, and the end of a 3-year relationship. I think it's just a lot to take in, and I could have never imagined that this is how my last quarter in college would turn out. And ultimately, I know that God is faithful. He may be taking things away to prune me and to grow me, and to grow me into who He wants me to become. And though I may not understand what's happening now or why it's happening now, I'm choosing to surrender and trust in the Lord, clinging on to His word. And I know that His plans are greater than mine, and His ways are higher than my ways. And so I guess to end this on a positive note, I've been blessed to stay in Santa Cruz for another year because I got into grad school for UC Santa Cruz. And so I'm very excited to see what God has in store for me this year. So that's how God has been working in my life currently. And so thanks for listening.
Hey Kyrie, my name is Weber Su and this is my testimony. So basically I'm going to chunk it into the first half and second half. The first half is going to be before college and the other one's after college. So basically I was born and raised into a Christian household just like most of you guys. And growing up, church was always just that place for me to hang out with people and stuff. Up until 8th grade, that was like it for me. But during 8th grade, I met a basketball player who was really good and pretty well known around this area. And I started training with him. And then like after I trained with him for a while, I realized a lot of things about like his characters that was just different than other like leaders, you know. And he was very, very just a servant, really humble, and he just and one thing I noticed is that he never cussed or anything, and I was like, wow, this guy is different from the world. And later I found out he was a Christian. He invited me to his church, and turns out his dad is a pastor. So then from that point on, I kind of just knew, when I first checked out the church, I like really enjoyed and really liked the community I had over there. So I eventually transitioned from going to this Chinese church to this Tongan church. And throughout the time when I was there from 8th grade all the way to like senior year, basically. And I still go there whenever I'm home right now. But basically, during the time when I was there, I was just able to grow so much more in my faith, and my just like my spiritual growth just skyrocketed when I was there. I wasn't like anywhere like super high up or anything, because I still have a lot to learn. But throughout being there, I really grew a lot as a Christian. And then up until college, I came into college very close minded, very prideful and judgmental. I told myself that I wasn't going to be able to find a church, a community like the one I have back home right now. So that really limited my growth when I first went to Santa Cruz. And I mean, when I was here, like before going to Santa Cruz, everyone's like, yo, Santa Cruz really isn't the best in terms of Christian community. You know, people go over there to smoke weed and to do drugs and stuff. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just go. Yeah, I that didn't like register with me that much. I was like, either way, I should still be able to find something. So yeah, so I came to Santa Cruz, and all of my first year was, I think my freshman year was probably one of the lowest time of my life. It was just a series of event where I keep telling myself, nah, I can't get any worse. And it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And then at first I tried looking out for a Christian community because I was like, oh, it's important, I want to be in one. But I also kind of did it out of obligation because I feel like, oh, I'm a Christian, so I should be in something. And I kind of replaced fellowship with church, because church was just like, oh, it's like so far from like the UCSC campus. So I was just like, you know what? I'll just take the easy way out. So I was just going out of obligation just to go. I was like, every time I go, I never stayed after. I just left right away. And that was because of the pridefulness inside of me and the judgmentalness, like judgmental side of me, that made me not want to open up to anyone in the fellowship. So, and some of the fellowships like Classis AA and KCCC, now known as Soon. So yeah, I was pretty close. I closed myself off to all of those group, but I was still there. And during the time, I always, like in my heart, I always blame them. Like, yo, why are they not doing this? Why are they not like reaching out to me or whatever? I was just making excuses for myself. But then by third quarter, so that was the first 2 quarters. By the third quarter, I was like, you know what? I don't need a fellowship anymore. I don't need a community. I convinced myself I don't need a Christian community, no more brothers or sisters. I'm gonna just solo queue this thing, you know? So that's when I started becoming very intentional with my devotion and my word, because I was like, if I'm not gonna go to church or anything, then I better make it up by doing something else. And I was very intentional with my devotions. Every morning, 7 in the morning, I would just grab my Bible, go to Cow Dining Hall, and I go to the balcony area, and I just look at the view and read my Bible, and it was just amazing. But third quarter was also the time where God kind of just slapped me in the face, because that was probably the lowest and like the hardest time of my life. I just felt super alone, like my friend group had fallen apart. They have hurted me a lot, and I just didn't know. So I started distancing myself from like the people who I was closest to the first 2 quarters. I was just like, you know what? I don't need you guys. I'm just gonna do my thing. And like just so happened they're like my roommates too. So it was super hard living on campus. Yeah, so it just kept building up and building up. Like I said, I thought it couldn't get any worse. It just kept getting worse until like the last until like week 7 or week 8. I was like being on campus, like mentally and like to a point physically, it was like hurting me. You know, I just didn't want to be there at all. Like my mental health was messed up. So I was like, and I had a bike, so I was like, you know, I'm just gonna grab this bike. I'm gonna go for a bike ride. So I grabbed the bike, and I met this lady. Her name was Michelle, and through Michelle, I found out she goes to TBC. No, not TBC. She went to TCC, and I was like, okay, awesome. Like I'll go, because she told me that was the Pentecost Sunday. She was like, there's barbecue and there's gonna be a 3-on-3 basketball tournament, and I love basketball, so I was like, you know what, I'll be there. And when I went to the service, it was so weird, dude. I was the only Asian guy there. There was no other race. It was just white and then me. Okay, there was like 50 white kids and then me. So I was just like, I kind of freaked out a little bit. And then afterwards, when basketball started, all these Asian people started popping up out of nowhere. And I was like, who are you guys during church service? And then I found out that they were from Kyrie. So that's when I was first introduced to Kyrie. And then, yeah, and then that upcoming Wednesday was my first time attending large group, where I met a bunch of people like Jordan, Nathaniel, Thomas, and you guys. Well, those guys from basketball. And it's funny, Thomas looked like a little kid to me too. I was like, this guy does not look like like he's like 20 or 29. So yeah, yeah. So that's basically the story of how I met Kyrie. But all throughout second year, as you guys know, I was still very distant from Kyrie, because I feel like my pride was still there, but I was still going to Kyrie, because I was like, you know, this is where God wanted me to be. Because before I went on that bike ride, that little retreat for myself to Natural Bridges, I was just praying to God. I was like, God, please reveal yourself to me, because I haven't felt your presence all of first year, and I don't know what's gonna happen if you don't like reveal yourself soon. So that's how God revealed himself to me. And I didn't see it as a coincidence at all, of me meeting Michelle, to me going to TCC, to me finding Kyrie. It was all just like part of his plan, and it was just a miracle that I'm even here right now. Yeah, so going back to it, what was I? Going back to it, all of second year, I was still kind of distanced from Kyrie. And it's funny, this photo right here, if Matt pulls it up, um, is a pretty good representation of me all of second year. You know, I was there because I was there for Kyrie, but like I'm that dude walking out of the picture because I didn't care too much for being here, you know. And that was again the pride that was inside of me telling me, oh, there's better stuff to do than to follow a Christian fellowship. So then, as most of you guys know, spring quarter of my second year, I rushed for a fraternity, and I'm currently in one right now. And then just like, I know like they drink, they do so much stuff, but I was never a part of that. But I surrounded myself with people like that. And during last summer, my pastor just had like sermons after sermons after sermons talking about how like you are who you surround yourself with. You know, it doesn't matter how much you try to resist a temptation or whatever. If you hang out with those people 24/7, you're basically one of them. And what really hit me was when he was like, hey, think of all the addict people in your life, so people who lifts you up, versus all the basement people who like pulls you down in your faith. And I was looking around at everyone. I was like, wow, I could not think of a single addict person in my life who like spiritually pulled me, like wanted, like invested in me. And I was looking at all the basement people, and I was like, dang, there's heck of people down there, you know. And I'm not saying like they're bad or anything. Obviously, it's like they weren't a part of my journey in growing my faith, you know. So that's when it hits me that, you know, I need to change. I don't want to go back to I don't want to go back to school being the same person I was, you know. And I told myself that it just passed in my head all the time. I was like, man, I wasted the first 2 years of my college career, but I don't have to waste the next 2, because if I was to leave Santa Cruz right now, I would literally regret everything that's happened. But then I was like, the only way I can make up for it is if I truly change myself and turn a whole 180, and just to stop being so prideful, stop being so judgmental, and be more open-minded to everyone. And a lot of you guys ask me why I cut my hair. This is the real reason why. Back then, I just tell you guys that I just needed to change because I don't want to explain all of this. But this is why I cut my hair, because I think within myself, I wanted to like sacrifice that part of me. I wanted to offer that part of me because, man, I love my long hair. Just letting you guys know, like, I identify as my long hair. And yeah, so by cutting my hair, I was just like, I want to change physically, and I want to change spiritually, and I want to change in the direction that I'm going. And so far, it's been awesome, man. I've been a lot more open to Kyrie. I mean, I'm the president now, like, I wouldn't be where I am right now if I came in with the same attitude um, as I left. So yeah, that's all I got for you guys. Thank you for listening, and God bless. Peace out.